Good people YouTube, I'm the Watch Idiot, and here we have comparison number 2, and it's one that I've been thinking about for a really long time and actually played a pretty big role in my purchase decisions, and it is the fan favorite SPB143 versus my beloved personal SNE569 P1. So just like last time, we have a total of 9 categories, 6 worth 10 points and 3 worth 5 points for a total of 75 points. Oh, and I have a new bracelet for the SNE569, which works beautifully, fixes some of the problems. So yeah, stay tuned for more info about that combo because it was completely unexpected and a very random combination. Also, I wanted to make a video this week about the benefits of a small collection to set off my collection purge, but I haven't done that video yet, but I still want to begin the purge hopefully. So for sale are my Grand Seiko SBGT241, which is the 25th anniversary quartz, which is accurate to 5 seconds a year, which is ridiculous. And then we have the Omega Speedmaster X33 Skywalker, which I love, the Laurier Hydra Series 2, the Zelo Swordfish 40 in teal, the Olkin Weiss P-104, the Visitor Linden, Dan Henry 1962, G-Shock Casio Hidden Coast, and finally my Islander ISL 27. So if you're interested in buying one of these, just send me a link to the cheapest comparable watch, you know, pretty much mint condition, box of papers is where my watches are at, and then I'll just beat that price just because it's just a lot easier for you and me. So yeah, let's just get into the video now. Okay, so I'm sticking with 9.5 for the SPB143, and for the SNE569 P1, I gave it a 9. But because both of these dials are just so much fun to look at in different lights and situations, and the SPB143 remains at 9.5 just because it's just an amazing dial to look at. The sunburst finish is really well done. It plays in the light extremely well, and of course I am biased towards gray dial since gray is my favorite color. But the final edge comes with the handset, which is probably one of my absolute favorites just because it's simple, effective, well proportioned, and finally they have that really awesome half polished, half brushed finish, which I haven't seen anywhere else. So the SNE569 gets 9 just because, you know, as far as diver dials go, this is a good one because it's black, which is great, but it has a very nicely done sunburst finish, which keeps things a little bit more interesting. And the handset here is very well proportioned, and also they're fully brushed, which I was not expecting for a watch, you know, at this price point from Seiko. So yeah, I'm a big fan of brush surfaces, so seeing this on the hands really elevates the watch in my eyes. And of course, they both have amazing lume, which is Seiko's Lumi Bright lume. So yeah, they scored the same on the lume end, and yeah, I mean, just seeing the Lumi Bright will just never get old. Okay, so for the SPB143, I gave it a 7.5, and the SNE569, after a long time thinking about it, I gave it an 8.5. The SPB gets 7.5 just because, you know, it's very nicely finished. I love the brushing on the top of the case, and I'm a huge fan of brushed case sides, and then obviously it stepped it up, you know, with that awesome bevel running on the top of the case. And in general, it's a pretty awesome case shape. I really like this sort of skin divery look. But the big disadvantage over here is that it wears much thicker and much heavier than expected, and you know, especially compared to other 40mm watches. The bezel has an effective coin edge, and the insert is black brushed steel, which I'm a huge fan of, and the bezel has the same sort of, you know, Seiko clicky feel, which is pretty solid, just maybe a bit better than normal. So the SNE569 ended up with 8.5 just because the finishing is pretty good for the price, and it has my beloved brush top, polished bevel, brush sides combo, and overall I really just like the muscular nature of the case that really comes from the sort of like wide lugs, and honestly that was much needed for a watch of this size. So the big plus side was the fact that it's just so thin and just so ridiculously comfortable. Yes, I know that this is quartz, but even if it was mechanical and it would be just maybe even, you know, 1 or maybe even 2 millimeters thicker, it would still wear absolutely beautifully. Yeah, bezel feel is the same sort of, Seiko feel, and the coin edge is grippy, but I absolutely love the fact that it has a gray bezel, which I love. And just to clear things up, I know Seiko officially says that it's blue, but I can just tell you straight up right now, if you have any doubts, that it is not blue. If it was blue, I wouldn't have bought it, and I probably wouldn't, and even if had I bought it, I wouldn't have loved it as much as I do. What I will say though is that there is a touch of blue in it, and it's more noticeable, that slight touch of blue, if it's next to something that is like pure gray, like a Graynado or something like that. But other than that, it's gray, not blue. So the SPB gets a 7 and the SNE will get an 8, which is actually gonna surprise quite a few people, and it kind of surprised me, I guess. So the SPB has a much more straightforward, bracelet. It looks good, feels solid, but the problem is that it's just way too thick and heavy for a watch that was supposed to be, at least on paper, an easy wearing 40mm daily wear. Also, the worst part of the bracelet are those giant gaps in the end links that you can actually just like push side to side over there, and it's completely unforgivable for a $1,000 watch. The SNE, on the other hand, is an interesting one. So before I get started, I have to specify that the way a bracelet feels on my wrist is extremely important to me, because if it's a beautiful bracelet and it just doesn't feel right on my wrist, or it's uncomfortable or has a hot spot, it's a garbage bracelet as far as I'm concerned. And it's for that reason why, the SNE scored high. So the stock bracelet is a downgrade compared to the case, I guess. I mean, with the hollow end links and the single piece links, but on the wrist, it feels super comfortable, and the end links are rock solid, weirdly enough, and really well designed to go with the flow of the bracelet. And honestly, I completely forgot that they are actually hollow because they're that good. And I said before, and you might have noticed as I was flailing my arms around over here, that I have a different bracelet on my SNE right now, and this is actually Uncle Seiko's present bracelet for the Black Bay 58. So this is the bracelet that he sent over to me alongside my Speedy bracelet that I did a video on, and it looks awesome on the Black Bay 58, but I took it off of the Black Bay 58 once when I got the half link that he makes. So during that time, I was just super curious about the mid link widths, weirdly enough, especially after that random discovery of the Oris bracelet working on the Speedmaster so well. And then I noticed that the center links for the SNE over here was the exact same as the President bracelet. So obviously I had to try that out, and it works amazingly, actually. So the only thing that's off here is that there is a bit of a visible gap when you see it looking directly at the 12 o'clock and the 6 o'clock side, and then the end link is slightly loose, but you really can't see at all the gap from the top when you're looking at it at the dial. And if you squeeze the end links a little bit more, it'll get rid of the looseness. So yeah, I mean, the SNE sings on this bracelet, and yeah, the bracelet is solid, but much lighter than the original bracelet. So it absolutely works perfectly with the very thin and relatively light case of the SNE. So yeah, comment down below if you want Uncle Seiko to make some end links for this SNE so that we can finally, really get using this bracelet over here, because honestly, I'm genuinely gonna keep it on this bracelet over here because it's that great. So this section was a tough one just because the SPB is mechanical and the SNE is a solar quartz. So it's kind of hard to compare the two and score them accordingly. Last time I gave the SPB a 7 just because it's a 6R35 movement. It's solid, 70-hour power reserve, but there is a chance that the accuracy can be anywhere up to plus 25 seconds a day or minus 15 seconds a day, which is just insane for a $1,000 watch, honestly. And on the other hand, I happen to love solar quartz movements a lot, and the fact that the SNE is quartz is a big reason why I love the watch. And for my wearing habits, which is quite sporadic and changing watches quite often, it's a huge advantage for me. And actually, I would go so far as to say that I probably wouldn't have bought the SNE if it was mechanical, since I don't need just another small diver that will just die and I'll have to reset every single time that I want to wear. So just, I guess, in terms of fairness, at least in my mind over here, I'll give it a 7 just because I don't think that this section really works well over here, because, you know, obviously in the eyes of the world, quartz is worse, whereas for me, the quartz in this case, you know, has a giant advantage over the 6R35 movement. So yeah, the equal score doesn't give either side an advantage, you know, so I'm expecting to hear a lot about this in the comments over here. But yeah, honestly, if there's a tie at the end, then I'm gonna give the advantage to the SNE, because this is my video, it's my comparison, and I prefer the quartz in this case. So the SPB gets an 8 and the SNE will get a 9. And yeah, the SPB is an overall comfortable experience, but like I mentioned before, on straps it can get a bit top heavy, and the bracelet being so thick makes it a little bit more tiring than I would have expected for a standard 40mm diver. And the SNE, on the other hand, is seriously one of the most comfortable watches I own, and that's down to the thin case and the stock bracelet. Despite the aesthetic downfalls, it does really feel good on the wrist. And of course, you can put it on the Uncle Seiko President bracelet that I got for the Black Bay 58 that I mentioned earlier, at which point it's even better and more comfy, but I'm not going to include that into the score because it would have scored higher at that point, honestly. Okay, so value was an interesting section because I have a lot of thoughts on Seiko's ever diminishing value proposition over the past few years, and that rant can be a whole other video, honestly. But for the SPB, I'll keep it at 7, and the SNE will get a 7.5, I guess, and that's down to both watches having glaring oversights and brazen cost cutting, mostly in the bracelet department, but they're still pretty good. So the SPB score lowered just because even at the street price of about $1,000, it's a pretty steep price compared to other watches that you can get at that same price point, and, you know, given all the stuff that's wrong with the SPB. Same thing goes for the SNE. Even at $350, it is a pretty steep price compared to other watches at that price point and other watches with the same specs. So I love Seiko. I've owned, I think, about 10 plus watches from them, and yeah, I mean, the Seiko name and design language can only carry the brand so far, and Seiko as of late has gone way past that limit, especially when you consider the sticker prices. You know, this thing was $500, which is just insane. It's just insane. So yeah, honestly, they've priced me out of their watches, which it does make me quite sad. So both watches would be classified as strap monsters for sure. So the SPB will get a 4 and the SNE will get a 4.5. And I was considering giving the SNE a 5, but I refrained. So the SPB looks great on a bunch of straps for sure, and there's lots of space between the spring bar and the case, and it obviously has a 20mm lug width, which is perfect. But like I said, the watch head is very heavy, which can be problematic for a lot of straps. And the SNE, on the other hand, works on pretty much anything you throw at it, maybe short of very dressy straps, but I guess even then you could probably pull it off. But yeah, other than that, I mean, it's pretty much faultless in terms of Strapmonsterability. Okay, so this is obviously super subjective, but the SPB gets 4 and the SNE will get 3. So yeah, I mean, the SPB is a very striking looking watch for sure. And I mean, the skin diver case in the grand scheme of things isn't something that you see very often. And also, I mean, that dial, hands, bezel combination is just so good. The SNE gets a 3 just because, you know, it's an amazing looking watch. I absolutely love it, but you know, all things considered, it is a relatively normal looking watch, but it still has some of that Seiko flair and the lovely details, which is great. And on top of that, you really don't see gray bezels all that often, which is quite a shame, actually. So for my made up TWI Happy Index, I'm giving both 4.5 just because, you know, both of them really do make me feel happy, but for very different reasons. The SPB just once again, just looks stunning when you see everything playing in the light and everything like that. Yeah, honestly, every single time I looked down at my wrist and I saw it just shining in the light, it just excited me so much, and it made me happy that way. So the SNE has a different sort of happiness because when I see it, I don't get lost in the different reflections, although I do love the finishes. Rather, I just love how close to perfect this watch is for me, and I just love looking at it and just thinking about that. The size, the hands, the gray bezel, the black dial, everything of that. Oof. So I've totaled up the scores, and the final score is SPB with 58.5 points out of 75, and the SNE has 61 points out of 75. So yeah, I mean, I'm not entirely surprised that the SNE won, and I guess that tiny margin really comes down to the ergonomic differences of both watches, because in the end, both of these watches are awesome. Also, I'm glad that the SNE won out, just because it does make me feel better about not getting the SPB. And yeah, the SPB has been on my radar ever since it got released, because it's a 40mm gray dial diver from Seiko with a 20mm lug width. You know, that's pretty much as close to perfection as you can get. But the problem was the $1,200 price tag, and honestly, it's just way too expensive for that watch, and also it would have potentially had difficulty competing against other watches in my collection for wrist time. But even when I got my SNE, I wanted the SPB, especially after being able to wear it for 2 weeks. But I just loved the SNE so much that at that point, it really didn't make much sense to go and spend $1,000 to get a watch with a share of problems when I already have a grayish dial everyday diver from Seiko right on my wrist. So that being said, I really do think that these watches can coexist together in a collection, just because their looks and overall experiences are pretty different, so they can serve different purposes. So yeah, I know that a lot of you will have lots of thoughts and opinions on these two watches and how everything went down in terms of scoring, so let me know everything down in the comments. I want to hear what you guys think about it. And also, I think I remember quite a few of you own both of these watches, so yeah, let me know what you guys think of the final score and if you guys concur. And also, just another reminder that my collection purge has started, and I outlined the watches that I'm selling at the beginning of the video. So yeah, once again, if you're interested, send me an email at over here, thewatchidiot@gmail.com. So yeah, as always, thank you so very much. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button and the subscribe button, because that helps the channel grow and reach more people who will enjoy the video and the channel. So yeah, until the next video, good day.